So if running high impact discovery and having a very accurate sales forecast are important to you, then you're going to want to pay attention to this session, because in this session we're going to talk about this concept of importance and priority. These are actually two very different things that salespeople confuse all the time, and if you're confusing them and not asking the right questions about them in the right order, it could be costing you sales. Welcome back to the Sales Lab. My name is David Premer, and I'm really excited for this topic because this is actually quite I love the science of selling and all these kind of various subtle topics around how we conduct discovery, which is arguably the most important part of the sales process. And when we do discovery, we often ask questions to our customers about the importance of the problem they're looking to solve. And sometimes we talk about priority. These are two completely different things. And if I can actually here, I'm gonna go to the slides for a second. Here's what we're gonna talk about today. And I just want to start off by kind of outlining the problem. Okay, like here's the problem. Now, just to kind of frame it up, what is importance? What is priority? Importance speaks to the relative magnitude, the size of the problem that the customer is looking to solve. Priority speaks to the kind of the order of operations, right? It's like, okay, how high on the list is this thing for me to actually, spend money on and try to solve? And the problem is that oftentimes in sales, we ask about things around the importance of a problem. We try to kind of gauge the scope and scale of the problem without focusing on the priority. What is the likelihood that the customer is actually going to move forward and do this thing? Because the reality is, and I say this, many things are important, right? Many things are important. Few things are actual priorities. And I'll give you an example. If I were to ask you, about a couple things that, might be important to you, I might ask you about your health. I might ask you about your family. I might say things like, tell me, is your health important to you? And you might of course, my health is important to me, right? I might say, well, what about family? Is family important to you? And of course, family is the most important thing, right? When I ask you these things intellectually, you understand that the magnitude of these things in your life are important, right? But if I were to ask you, okay, so if health is the most important thing and family is the most important thing, then why are you spending so much time, working? And why aren't you eating right? And why aren't you going to the gym? And why aren't you exercising, right? These things are important. And I'm not, maybe you're fantastic at all these things, right? These things are important, but they may not be high priority for you in terms of taking action. And oftentimes in sales, we conduct our discovery, we ask our customer about the importance of the problems they're looking to solve. And sometimes that can lead us astray because, again, many things are important. Not everything is a priority. And I'll give you an example. There was one lady I was speaking to at one of my events, and she was telling me that she focuses here, if I give you some visuals here, she focuses on helping customers reduce churn, right? And for those of you in the SaaS space and the high-tech space, you know that this idea of, we sign up our customers for a, recurring revenue service, and some of them leave over the course of time, right? So she says, hey, look, I work with customers, and my job is to help them put the processes and systems in place to help reduce their churn. And so she says, hey, look, David, I have this really great question that I formulated. And she was kind of sitting in one of my trainings, one of my sessions. And one of the tactics that I use for discovery, which I actually outline in this video. So if you go to the Cerebral Selling YouTube channel or you feel like typing this in directly, this is what the thumbnail looks like. I call it the high impact discovery question. But essentially, it's my 1 to 10 questions. I talk about this in my book. I talk about this in a bunch of other videos as well. This idea of you ask your customer, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being this, 1 being this, where would you say you sit in terms of this particular problem? So she's telling me that, hey, look, I went to this customer and I formulated this question, churn, reducing churn in your business. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is reducing churn, right? And so what she's trying to get at, she thinks she's trying to get at, is this customer going to move forward? I'm trying to create this pain, the sense of urgency, which nothing wrong with that. I like that. Create a pain, a sense of urgency. Oh yeah, you know what? Churn is actually quite important and we need to move on it and we should hire you to help us reduce our churn. So she's asking though about importance. And to a technology company, a SaaS company, yeah, churn is one of the key metrics that they look at. The average customer lifetime value, all that kind of stuff is important in terms of the business. But depending on the magnitude of that problem, depending on the customer's awareness of that problem, it may not be the most important thing. Yeah, churn is important. I don't want customers to cancel the subscription. But that doesn't mean that I'm ready to move forward with a solution to reduce churn. And so what happens is we go out and we ask our customers, like, how important is saving money to you? How important is it to reduce your efficiency there? How important is it for you to attract and retain top talent, right? They might say, well, look, that's super important. Without people, without all these things, like, we have no business. And so what do you do as a sales rep? You go back into your CRM and you kind of write that down. You're like, oh yeah, the customer thought this is really important. I'm going to go back in my sales forecast. I'm going to forecast this thing at, 60%, 70%, whatever it is, because the customer told me it was important. Meanwhile, lots of things are important, but not everything is a priority, right? And so my advice back to, this lady who was formulating this question was to say, you know what, sometimes it's good that, first of all, that you identify that there's a problem there that someone is thinking about solving. But the question is, if I'm trying to forecast this and I'm trying to get the customer to understand that they need to move forward at a certain time frame, or understand how like the impact of not solving this problem could be, then what I really need to do is get at the priority, right? So if I were to reframe that question, I might say, like, hey, look, I understand for many SaaS companies like yours, reducing churn is really, really important. I get it. Do you mind if I ask, like, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being like, this is the most, high priority initiative we have at our organization. And if we solve this churn problem, boom, like it would bust our company wide open, and, we'd IPO and get acquired and all this. That would be like a 10, right? And 1 would be, hey, look, churn is important to every SaaS company. But to be honest, like, we got a million other things that we're focused on. Where would you say you sit on that spectrum, right? And so now all of a sudden, it's like me coming to you and saying, hey, look, I work with clients like you all the time. I know your health is important. I know spending time with family is important. But relative to the things that you have going on in your life, where would you say that spending the time to eat healthy, to exercise, to spend enough time with your kids and your family and your significant others and all that kind of, where does that sit, right? Because the first will give me a sense for the magnitude of the problem. The second will give me a sense for your desire and timeliness to want to solve it. It's important to ask about both, but if you're just asking about the importance, right now, I'm not saying there's no correlation, but if you're just asking about the importance, you're going to be missing a huge opportunity to be able to forecast that deal, right? To like know when it's coming in, and also to create that sense of urgency in the mind of the customer. In sales, one of the questions people ask all the time is like, David, how do I create that sense of urgency in the mind of the customer? And really, like, I'm not a fan of like creating per se the sense of urgency. Either like it has to exist or it doesn't, but we can bring to light that sense of urgency in the mind of our customers. And so one of the things I just kind of want to wrap up here as we kind of talk about this idea of importance and priority is this question of like, well, how can I maybe turn something that's important into a priority? Right? Like, let's say, for example, it was important for me to stay healthy, right? It may not be a priority for me to get on the treadmill and exercise until the doctor comes to me and says, David, if you don't do this, you're going to have a heart attack in the next, God forbid, in the next 5-10 years, right? And so this idea that sometimes we need a little bit of a catalyst to turn something that's important into a priority. And, and maybe it's something like, what I just shared with you now. Like, okay, like, well, what happens if you don't do this? Like, what would happen? And in fact, I actually talk about this in my content, and I talk about this in my book, specifically in the chapter on objection handling. And if you have my book, page 234, I talk about this objection handling concept I call Turn the Future into the Past. And actually, it also pairs very well with tactic number 5 that comes after this. This is tactic number 4, called Consider the Alternative. But the idea is this, right? If you've kind of ascertained what the relative importance of a particular issue is to your customer, right? They're trying to reduce churn, they're trying to increase efficiency, they're trying to reduce this, that, they're trying to grow their customer base, right? And they say, look, doing this is really important to you. Like, let's say growing the talent in their organization was really important. They're like, yeah, we need people, we need to grow. They say, okay, well, great. Maybe I sell some kind of talent solution, and I'm trying to figure out, like, is this actually something you're going to move on? Now, look, I could ask something very simple. I could just say, hey, look, on a scale of 1 to 10, or from a priority perspective, to be honest, I haven't seen too many customers move on this kind of initiative unless, filling the bench with amazing talent was kind of like the top 1, 2, or 3 things that you were focused on in your company. And I'm not saying that it's not important, right? It could be number 4, 5, or 6, and maybe it's not a this year thing. But when I look at my customers, my clients, like the ones that really do this and put the organizational horsepower behind it are the ones that have this on their kind of, top 1, 2, or 3 order of priority. Like where would this sit for you? Right? So I'm kind of priming you. This is a tactic I also teach called assumptive priming, which is actually the very first Sales Lab Live that we did. If you want to go look back where we talked about this idea of assumptive priming, where we kind of, some plant these seeds with people so they kind of have this appreciation. But you can always do this as well with this tactic I call turn the future into the past, which is to say, okay, like I'm trying to get a sense for like what impact this could have on your business. Now you're telling me, attracting top talent is really, really important. Let's say we fast forward 6 months, 12 months into the future, okay? And you have the top talent that you wanted on your team, right? Like whatever initiative you did, it was successful, and you have all these great people. What would life be like then? Like, what do you think the impact to your business would be, right? If I were to kind of, again, I call this turn the future to the past because you're fast forwarding to the future, kind of taking a look at what's there and bringing it back to the present and saying, okay, like, if we moved on this now, a year from now, assuming everything went well, like, would this be worth it to you to start now, right? It's like if I want you to get in shape and get healthy, I might say, let's fast forward 6 months in the future. You're going to the gym, you're eating well, you're preparing these healthy meals, you're spending more time with your family. What might life be like? And in a way, I'm kind of getting at the magnitude. I'm trying to kind of bump up the magnitude of that importance, right? Like, what would life be like? I want to show you what that value is, right? Like, what's that feeling again? But by showcasing that to you, I'm also trying to make it, if it makes sense, to be a higher priority, right? Because oftentimes people don't often appreciate the kind of the magnitude of the problem they're trying to solve and the sense of urgency to try to solve it. And so using tactics like the ones I teach in my objection handling section, where we talk about like turn the future in the past, or the tactic number 5, which I refer to as consider the alternative, which is say, okay, like let's say you didn't do this. Okay, let's say you didn't start eating better or exercising more. Fast forward a year. Okay, maybe doing nothing is the right thing. Maybe there's actually more important things that you could be doing to try to solve this problem for yourself and your business. And maybe this isn't a priority, right? Let's fast forward, 6 months, a year into the future. What would the future look like then, right? So this kind of goes part and parcel with, if I go back to my slide here for a second, turning something important into a priority and specifically asking about it, right? By really drawing out, like, what's the pain? Like, what would happen if we don't do this? Like, let's fast forward to the future, right? So I can try to get you to see it as more of a priority. So that's what I got for you today. This idea that importance and priority are 2 completely different tactics that salespeople sometimes confuse. Like, oftentimes we ask about the magnitude of the problem, the importance. We don't talk about the relative priority of the organization, the person who needs to solve it. And again, like, understanding both those things, asking about both those things will not only help you do much better and higher quality discovery, but it will help you more accurately forecast those deals because you're going to know the time horizon on which the customer is going to act. So that's all I got for you today on Sales Lab Live. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again on the next episode.